Wearing a pretty sharp blazer I bought at the Salvation Army. I laid 2 phones on the bar and ordered a drink. And then I shouldered the burden of euphoria and the loss of you into the cathedral music of a winter afternoon with the help of whiskey and flat, warm ale, hoping the swarming big bang of humanity and the gods they have made will have mercy on my violent soul. After all, it's sometimes a gentle soul, feeding with vigor and vehement, the lost pigeons gathering around my long windowed flat, running out of scraps, and remembering all the flesh in all the refrigerators of the carnivorous American isolationist night. And the wheel spins again, and I'm violent again, kicking at the confines of my bones, creating and recreating new societies in the basement of my skull, visiting and revisiting the burial ground of my stream of consciousness, the daily convention and its mandatory dawn, stealing away the vigor of imagination. Within the epiphenomenon of our lingering and languishing pre-prison paradigm, and transience becomes the last vestige of our resistance. And a moment is all of our inheritance. So of course, I deconstruct you, hoping to extend a formal greeting to the molecules of our origin and the memories of being and the meanings they conceal. You who wish to remain a hush in the rain, a hush uninterpreted, disguised as differentiated, a reproduction of a reproduction, advancing infinite regress to the very catacombs of consciousness, bypassing the real thing. And so in light of that, I work 1,000 jobs, and I have 1,000 bosses, mostly bastards, folded in on themselves to fend off the encroaching night of discontent, the vacancy they see in the eyes of their field hands, enslaved labor, the city builders and their progeny. They don't like to hear that. They all come from their previous careers, to their current careers, to their next career. A career-minded tribe starts driving to put on a good show, walking around the convalescence compound, pushing careers in a basket, dragging slow, soft thighs along the avenue, manufactured in the toxic wink of artificial images made real by the marriage of television and chronic misfiring of neurons in the lower chambers of the brain, with agate wrapped around their fingers like the rings of a dynasty. Nauseous with the imminent swirl of Disney's Times Square, the relentless carnival ride of our transience, reaching for the transcendent at a candle's flicker and whispers of memory at a smoldering wick. And I remember my own private Sisyphus. That long, strange trip toward the fields of abandonment, the hollow-eyed strangers and beggars. And how long does this God of wanderers mean for us to weep, taking one pill to greet the sun and another to greet the moon, and then a handful just for kicks? How long do you mean to defy deconstruction, a hush that whispers wishes into the homeless memories of the oh say can you see? We are not free American experiment in its advanced stages of dementia and decline, hoping for a favorable return on your investment. You, a breath set free in a thunderstorm. You who think you are a bird broke free from the prison house of deities and dishonesties, rolling your ride 55 times in a turnip field like a psychedelic accident in a time that man forgot. You who break my heart by the way you light your smoke, my heart that loved the way you held your coffee cup. You for whom I've conducted clandestine searches in every corner of every sunrise since I first saw your faces and their many reproductions. You whose body and brain are sold by discount store kings as damaged goods. The one who rides up on your bicycle in a billowing skirt, talking to everybody in the joint, a hugger of old men, a flasher of boys, the bane of college kids living on mommy's and daddy's allowance, your broken bones on full display, flagrantly juxtaposition yourself with the shadows of the faithful. And the elderly, ancient in their own right, trembling forward on canes up the tall stone steps of the cathedral, cathedral to confess their sins and eat the flesh and drink the blood of some god and make a memory in the invisible, impossible, to which to return in moments of dreadful visitation and further decay, and to reassure them that the broken bones of their memories are not really the catacombs of consciousness. You, the one who rides off on your bicycle built for one blue milk crate on the back, for carrying those things you find along the way and can't live without. Some kind of dreamed out nymph on an old man's bike in an invisible, idiosyncratic swirl gone on caffeine, nicotine, mushrooms, and whiskey, and a primitive mule kick of sex in the barroom bathroom in a quasi-enlightened, sun-showered state, trying on faces from the mirror of ancient images and wandering along the linear narratives of men, cutting straight lines through free, burgeoning, wind-dancing leaves and rivers in the dark hollow of your skull, a scene of primal agony. But now, I don't want to see you anymore. Sprawled among the ruins of your nights and dreams, smelling like cheap whiskey and cheaper smokes, your thighs slowly transfiguring into the softening musculature of swooning immortality, revealing the miracle of their supple nakedness as a mere parlor trick, copulating with the fetid fabric of an easy chair. Retreat your mind, playing S&M games with the flicker of your television screen, getting fucked for free in a wink of an American television dream as your dwelling is transfigured and becomes the epiphany of an unkept grave. A gesture of procrastination, cauterizing the imagination and against memories of the future and the old and ugly death that finally ends your protracted small-town suicide trip. It's what you've always wanted, and enjoy yourself. As for me, the boredom and alienation creep into the silver screen of my brain, and Highway 10 from the City of Angels to St. Augustine holds a certain appeal in a Louisiana rain, where I first took my second breath. Baptized in the name of the ain't no roads back from here, friend of the devil, who turned out to be a pretty wise old man. And I guess I wouldn't wash that baptism off if I could. We go walking in the park turned wilderness, and we're not surveilled or called back by the hideous sonic boom of the voices of wrath brooding over the growing formlessness of the night and the dark, dwindling into a late autumn dusk, echoing in a single scream of iron gray divine fiat. A trauma that crawls through the years of space-time continuum, rupturing the nimble daydreams of youth, born in the tall grass of fields gone wild where we wander naked and unashamed, innocent of the bloodshed of the former tenants who come and go with alien tongues and voiceless movements and brief epiphanies of the abandoning transcendent on the silver screen. Innocent of the naked dreams of vulnerable visionary youth, innocent of the haunted dusty windows, concealing darkened stretches of ancient highways where ruins, some sacred and some just plain ruination, crowd the empty silence with invisible voices, where girl meets boy, where my boy, caught in the gaze of the girl of his dreams, and the weather turning cold, wants to take her on a date and asks to borrow my car, and so I trade him title for title, his motorcycle for my car. And he took that girl on a date, he married her, they bought a house, and they proceeded to reproduce, reproduction after reproduction, some decent prince I might add, progeny upon progeny, until self-abandonment was upgraded to self-loathing, and mutual discontent drove them into a tailspin, and they rode that Cadillac dream over and over in a blood-soaked downriver winter field without end. Because repetition is slowly transformed into aphorism by the very act of repetition, forcing us to re-remember our hand-me-down home. And the empty farmhouse, blind-eyed with rage, and the gray lady of the space, who outlived all the husbands and hands and sons and daughters and lovers and friends, for whom killing, eating, bathing, purging are ancient silent clips of film of the memories of the just dead and gone, raking at the grass, grown completely mad around the apple tree and its bonsai tangle of forgotten limbs, leaving her fingerprints on withered clothespins dangling from the line, drying the laundry for the dead and for posterity, too weak to clean up the yard, spending dwindling daylight hours watching the vacuous barns complete their cyclical dance back to the earth. Dreaming of another May and the fragrant bloom of the century-old lilac outside the kitchen window, planted from a sprig by an other mother of all the living and all the dead, just an old ragged apron lost in the growing antinomian night of home turned homelessness and the encroachment of the faces of young strangers upon the windows and passages and burial grounds where husbands and lovers and children and hands whose ends are noted with little more grief than hogs gathered together in a final attempt to entomb memory, wandering away in a slow, clock-ticking, rocking chair dance. Consuming the final marriage of the residue of vitality, the demonic drear of repetition and impotence. Morning, afternoon, and evening forces me to remember the future of my own hopeless convalescence, wandering alone in family plots and bedrooms lost in the time the land forgot. May this transfiguration be swift from the primitive city of my youth where I felt safe in the rain to the great gaunt epiphany that is all the gestures of then, swarming in and around all the gestures of now, leading into the waning evening, humming old tunes in the secluded attic of my brain, pulsating in the cellular structure of my blood and bone, passing on in a handshake in the great leap of consciousness into the post-rational abyss where all remaining moments are abandoned spaces haunted by gongs and the voices that linger in its way. Thanks.